everyone! Today, we're setting off on an absolutely mind-expanding journey into the very architecture of our minds. We're going to deconstruct the familiar, everyday reality you and I just totally take for granted, and we're going to strip it right down to the bare minimum requirements for a conscious experience to exist at all. So grab your mental toolkits because we are looking at the invisible blueprints of our own awareness. I want you to consider this for a second. When you're deep in a vivid dream and you completely lack access to your physical, biological body just lying there in bed, who exactly is having that experience? You see, we tend to assume that our everyday, waking, physical reality is the absolute only valid form of conscious experience. But if that's true, why do states like dreams, deep meditation, or even near-death experiences still feel so incredibly structured and, well, real? Okay, let's dive into this. On one side, we have our ordinary waking consciousness. It's stable, it's embodied, we're moving through space and time. But on the other side, we have altered or extraordinary phenomenology, like those dreams we just talked about. And the really fascinating part here is that despite massive fundamental differences in how these states operate, they both still feel like structured experiences. In a dream, entities still appear to you as entities. Events still have clear sequences. It raises a pretty profound question. What actual features of experience remain invariant across these vastly different modes of consciousness? Section 1. The primitives of experience. Let's strip reality down. To find the absolute bare minimum requirements of experience, I want you to perform a little mental magic trick with me. Imagine just stripping away the physical space around you. Poof, it's gone. Now, erase the whole concept of time ticking by. And finally, completely erase your biological body. What is left? What are the absolute foundational building blocks required for an experience to simply exist before all those fancy bells and whistles are added? Well, according to independent researcher John Cantillo, what you're left with are 5 candidate primitive capacities. Basically, this is the absolute minimal toolkit required for any coherent experience. First, there has to be experiential presence. Just the raw fact that an experience is happening. Second, differentiation. The ability to tell that one thing is different from another thing. Third, persistence and reference identity, which is enough stability to actually have a point of view. Fourth, relation. The ability for things to relate to one another. And finally, capacity for significance. The sheer possibility that any of this can actually matter. Now, what's really interesting about this is how these blocks work together. Think of them as a grammar. None of those 5 capacities can generate an experience all on their own. Instead, they form what's called an invariant phenomenological grammar. Just like linguistic grammar dictates the structural rules of a sentence, but doesn't actually hand you the words, this phenomenological grammar dictates the underlying structural rules that allow any experience, whether you're waking or dreaming, to simply make sense and be coherent. And when you take that grammar and you look at all the possible ways it can be arranged, you get something called Omnon. Now, Omnon isn't a physical place, it's not a magical realm, and it's not some universal hive mind. It's a descriptive state space. It represents the vast, practically infinite realm of all possible coherent, conscious experiences that play by the rules of that invariant phenomenological grammar. It contains our waking life, sure, but it also contains so much more. And this brilliantly illustrates the foundational architecture we've built up so far. Starting right at the very top, we have our 5 primitive capacities. Moving down, we see how they naturally organize into stable relations, which creates our invariant phenomenological grammar. This grammar then structures that vast, infinite realm of Omnon. And finally, right at the bottom, out of Omnon emerge particular, coherent experiential worlds, like the specific waking reality you're experiencing right now as you listen to this explainer. Section 2. Emerging space and time. It's time to reconstruct reality. Okay, so now that we've broken reality completely down, we get to reconstruct it. But we gotta start by challenging one of the most deeply ingrained beliefs we have as human beings. We tend to view space and time as the absolute, irreducible containers of our existence, right? We just assume they're the grand stage upon which everything else happens. But what if they aren't the stage? What if they're actually just the set pieces? The source framework proposes that familiar features like space, time, and even your sense of self are not fundamental primitive capacities at all. No way. Instead, they are emergent phenomenological parameters. Basically, they're highly complex structures built strictly out of those much simpler grammar rules we just talked about. Think about how experience space could actually be constructed. Concepts like near, far, inside, and outside aren't baseline reality. They emerge step by step. First, you have to differentiate two things. Then, they must persist long enough to be identified. Finally, you establish a stable relation between them. From those super simple relational building blocks, the rich, dimensional, and metric sensation of space emerges as a mode of organizing your experience, rather than some independent container you're just sitting inside of. And experienced time, it emerges in the exact same way. Temporal parameters like before, after, and duration are simply modes of organization. When you have experiential variation, plus the ability to identify something across a change and a relational structure connecting those states, you begin to experience a flow. Time is literally an emergent parameter organizing the differences and continuities within your experience. And it goes even further than just space and time. Our enduring sense of physical objects, and even our own narrative identities, the autobiographical self with a past and a future. These are highly complex constructs. They're emergent features built right on top of this emerging space and time. You, as a narrative self, are an incredibly elaborate phenomenological parameter. How wild is that? Section 3. Experiencing here and now. Let's talk about the biological tether. So if the realm of possible experiences in Omnon is so unimaginably vast and infinite, why does our everyday waking reality feel so heavy, concrete, and specific? Well, the answer is experiential localization. Think of this as the process where your biology acts as an anchor. It takes the vast, infinite potential of your consciousness and tethers it down incredibly tightly to a highly specific state. It's a coupled regime where the observer and the biological actor become totally integrated, purely to ensure your survival. This localization basically operates as a three-pillared tether. The very first pillar is that your experience is anchored entirely to this organism. Your phenomenological awareness is relentlessly tied to the physiological needs, the sensory inputs, and the survival requirements of your specific biological body. Let's move to and see how this builds. The second pillar of your tether is spatial. Your consciousness is geographically locked to this place. Out of all the infinite potential spatial organizations in Omnon, your waking experience is strictly oriented around your immediate physical surroundings. Why? So you can actually navigate and survive your immediate environment. And that brings us to the third and final pillar, this moment. You are temporally locked in a precise, constantly unfolding present. Your waking consciousness is hyper-focused on the exact, tiny sliver of time where immediate action can actually be taken to ensure you persist as an organism. Because we're tethered so tightly for survival, our biological brains act as these massive, heavy-duty filters. We have operational salience, which is basically the backstage crew invisibly handling background biological tasks, like regulating your heartbeat or predicting basic physics. But then we have phenomenological salience. This is the incredibly tiny, highly filtered sliver of reality that actually gets permission to reach your conscious awareness so you can plan, learn, and act. You only consciously experience exactly what is necessary to survive. So the crucial point is really captured here. Ordinary waking consciousness may represent only one particular organization of conscious experience, rather than consciousness in its entirety. Everyday waking life isn't the totality of consciousness, not even close. It is just one highly specialized, localized flavor of consciousness designed by evolution to keep a biological organism alive. We are essentially making a distinct trade-off. Waking life gives us what we call narrow accessibility. We are completely locked to this body, this place, and this moment. But in exchange, it gives us high actionable depth, rich tools like memory and complex agency to actually survive. On the flip side, altered states like dreams or near-death states loosen that tether. They offer broad accessibility to other totally different experiential organizations in Omnon, but usually that comes at the cost of that actionable depth and immediate survival utility. Which leaves us with this final, truly mind-expanding thought. If absolutely everything we know, our physical space, our ticking time, our deeply felt sense of self, is just one tightly tethered, biologically localized regime built from super simple grammar rules, what other infinite, coherent experiential worlds might exist in the vastness of Omnon, just waiting beyond the edges of our everyday waking state? I really want you to think about that the next time you close your eyes. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, stay curious.